Welcome back to Lit Sports Online. We're here with the first episode of Split Decision in quite a while. Yeah, the virus got us down, folks. Didn't see much point in covering weird little Apex cards that didn't matter. But here we are for UFC 252 for the trilogy fight between Stipe Miocic and Daniel Cormier for the heavyweight title. It's an exciting card. It's at the UFC Apex Center, so there's no crowd. There's limited people in the room. There's a smaller octagon. There's lots of kind of weirdness around this fight, so it kind of feels weird to have the fight that settles who the greatest UFC heavyweight of all time is with all these crazy variables. But here we are nonetheless with one of the biggest fights you can ask for and one of the weirdest time for sports ever.
Before we get into it, what's it like, do you think, to fight without a crowd? Like, how did that change anything?
I don't know. I've heard some fighters say they like it. I've heard some say they don't. Some of them feed off the crowd a little bit, and some of them are, just try to be less emotional and less, observant of their surroundings and things like that and stay focused. But, that's just depends on personal preference. So it's very interesting. It's weird to watch because cause you can hear everything.
Right.
If somebody gets kicked in the head, it sounds like a baseball bat. You know what I mean? It's weird, but it doesn't seem to have affected the entertainment value or interest in the fights.
And we certainly have a big one this weekend coming up, for sure.
I'm excited. It's going to be a good one.
Tell me a little bit about the preliminary card to start the night off.
Yeah, so there's the one fight I want to talk about there is just Jim Miller versus Vinc Pichel, just because I can't believe Jim Miller is still going. This dude's been around for forever. He's one of the best lightweight contenders out there for a little while. And, he just continues to keep fighting, continues to get finishes, continues to put on exciting fights. And, Lyme's disease be damned. This dude's fighting, a couple times in a couple months. And it's an exciting fight, and Vinc Pichel's an exciting fighter as well. But I think that what it's going to come down to is the experience of Jim Miller and his edge that he holds in grappling and submissions. I think it's going to be a little much for Pichel to handle. But I think if it stays on the feet, it should be a really exciting fight. I think Pichel's, maybe got a little bit more power in his punch, but as far as like boxing skill for skill, it's a pretty close fight, so it should be fun.
And that leads us right into the main card, and you've got a really interesting, intriguing fight between John Dodson and Merab Dvalishvili. Can you tell me a little bit about that fight and what you're kind of excited to see there? Yeah,
so John Dodson is one of those guys who at this point is kind of like you hate to use the term, but he's a gatekeeper to like the top of the division. If he's one of those guys who, if you can beat him, they're gonna then there's no place to go. They're gonna throw you to the wolf top. There's no middle of the road fighters after you beat a guy like John Dodson. He's got a good name value, and he's a phenomenal fighter. He's got great power in his hands. He's got great wrestling, and so that's what makes this an interesting matchup for a guy like Merab Dvalishvili, who is like a cardio powerhouse. He is just nonstop pace. He never gets tired. He never stops coming for you and pressuring you. I mean, dude, the guy got 13 takedowns in his last 3-round fight. So even if he's not holding people down and, punishing them on the ground and landing big strikes or going for submissions, if they're getting back up, he's not letting them rest. They're not getting a chance to get anything moving on the feet. He just is going to keep pressuring them and just takes them right back down. I mean, that's over 4 takedowns a round in a 3-round fight, which is unheard of for the most part, and I think that pressure is going to be, it's in a fight with a guy like John Dodson, putting that much pressure on somebody moving forward that consistently can be dangerous because Dodson's got some big power in his hands. That's what got him to the title. He had a title shot against Demetrius Johnson, I think twice, lost both times, but getting there is no joke either. So it's a real interesting fight. I have a soft spot for Dvalishvili because he comes out of the Serra Longo camp, and I love those guys. But it's a big fight for both of these guys. Dodson, is stamping out a highly touted contender who's had some pretty dominant performances, and if Merab wins, it's the biggest name on his, of his career so far, and so it's a big step up, and it'll launch him towards the top of the division for sure.
And then you have the first heavyweight, fight of the night between Dos Santos and Rozenstruik. Can you just tell me about that battle? I mean, obviously Dos Santos is pretty well known.
Yeah, and Dos Santos is, he's looking great lately, in the sense of like what we see in his training and all that stuff, and what we see of him in the media. But he's on a 2-fight losing streak at the moment. He's two knockouts too, so it's not a good spot for him to be in. He's a former champ, who is, he's one of the best to do it in the last, one of the best to ever do it. But he doesn't hold a candle to the resume that Stipe and Cormier have. But so he's in a tough spot, and he's going up against a guy in Rozenstruik who's a dangerous striker as well. Rozenstruik, his last fight, he kind of got steamrolled by the force of nature that is named Francis Ngannou. That dude just overwhelms every person he comes in contact with his speed and power. And since he's shored up some of his takedown defense and added a little bit of strategy to his game, he's gotten so much better, especially since his last fight with Stipe. But it's a tough fight for both guys. Rozenstruik came in with some hype. He's a kickboxer with some absurd number of fights in kickboxing. I think it's over 100. But he had some wins, but then he had some losses, and then his highest profile win is unfortunately a fight that he was losing. Basically, he lost until the last 3 seconds of the last round. The fight is 4:57 of round 5, and he caught Alistair Overeem with a crazy, just leaping punch against the cage, split Overeem's face halfway up his cheek, which is gross. Look up a picture.
Absolutely gnarly fight.
And so, it's unfortunate for him that his highest profile win is looked at as kind of like a fluke, because Overeem won 99.9% of that fight. He lost a couple seconds of it, and he's super dangerous, yes, but I think that fight showed that a guy who is a more technical fighter, controls the distance a little better, and is minds his P's and Q's, doesn't leave himself open for a big shot, is capable of beating Rozenstruik, because Rozenstruik doesn't have the best striking defense. He kind of stands upright a lot, and he kind of leans back a little bit and tries to back straight up a lot of times when people are coming towards him. So it makes it pretty easy for a guy like Overeem or Junior Dos Santos, who two of the most technical strikers in the division, to kind of take advantage of that. So I think that if we see the Junior Dos Santos that we saw recently against Ben Rothwell, who takes his time and has a technical boxing fight instead of trying to land that knockout and throw those big power shots where he tends to open himself up, then I think that Junior can easily win the fight. But it's just a question of what he's going to do and whether or not he is cognizant enough of the little things to not leave that opening for Rozenstruik to land that big shot. Because if Rozenstruik has the chance to land that big shot, he will, and he does have the power to end anyone's night immediately. The other thing to consider is that Dos Santos is a much better grappler. So if Dos Santos really wants to just win the fight and win the fight only, he would just go in there and get some takedowns and dominate on the ground. Rozenstruik, we have not seen his ground game, or we have seen his ground game, and we have not seen anything great out of him or any reason to believe that he wouldn't get dominated by somebody like Dos Santos when he got dominated so well by Derek Lewis.
So do you have a prediction at all that you can give us that you think might happen?
I just have a soft spot for Dos Santos. I've loved watching him fight for years, and I remember being at a Buffalo Wild Wings and ordering my beer and getting my beer, and then looking up and the fight was over because it lasted 75 seconds when he knocked out Cain Velasquez in the first ever UFC on Fox. it was like such a huge moment. It was so cool. And so after that, he got mauled by Velasquez twice. But I want Dos Santos to win, and I think that Dos Santos has recently changed camps. He's fighting out of ATT in Florida now, which is a great camp, has a ton of champions. And I think that they're smart enough to know what he needs to do to win, which I think is stay technical, stay on the outside, keep it tight defensively, and he should walk away with the victory. I think Dos Santos can pull off I think it'll be a TKO for Dos Santos or a decision, and if Dos Santos does not win, it's an early KO from Rozenstruik.
And that leads us to our next fight. It's the bantamweight fight. I'm actually really excited for this one between Sean O'Malley and Marlon Vera. O'Malley's obviously undefeated coming into this. What are your thoughts about this fight?
It's a fun one because it's two guys who are kind of on the upswing right now. O'Malley's coming in and he's on this. He's got a ton of hype behind him. He's undefeated. He's knocked out people in his run. He came from Dana White's Contender Series, so the higher ups have a soft spot for him because they found him on their show, and so he's gotten quite a bit of hype behind him. He's also really good at his his social media and marketing presence, so that certainly doesn't help ingratiate him with the younger crowd among the fight fans. But both these guys have a lot of momentum behind them. Both of them are super dangerous. Marlon Vera trains with one of my favorite coaches in the game, Jason Perillo, who is famously Chris Cyborg's coach. He also coached Rafael dos Anjos to a title. He coached, I think, Bisping for a little while. I mean, he's a fantastic coach, and Marlon Vera is very, very dangerous in all aspects of the game, but Sean O'Malley is one of those guys who's just so – he has such a confidence in his game. And he's just so comfortable in the cage, and when he's fighting people, that enables him to do crazy striking things that most people can't pull off. And his timing and his accuracy are great. It's very kind of similar to watching, an Anderson Silva or Conor McGregor fight where they're landing these real, it doesn't look like they're throwing a ton of power, but they're just landing these technical strikes that at long distances, they're just so precise and so well timed. And I think that's what makes the great strikers in the game is that timing and that accuracy. And Sean O'Malley has that. I mean, you've seen his highlights. He's insane to watch. It's super fun. And his last win over Eddie Wineland is no joke. He's a former WEC champion before the UFC had those divisions, and then they bought the WEC and brought those divisions in. So it's equivalent to the UFC before they were in there. But he's a great striker, and so it's a big win for Eddie Wineland. But I do think that Marlon Vera has had he's a much longer career, but he's had a tougher road, I think, of it in the UFC. And he's not undefeated, but he's never been finished in his career. So Sean O'Malley's not going to find it easy to get the TKO or KO. And if you want to go by the book that they've built up, Marlon Vera's had harder competition, I think. And so Marlon Vera is a little more tested, a little more, we know how rounded he is. We know he's got great training, great camp, great team. And one of the things that they emphasize in that Perillo camp is the mind game. They're really strong mentally. You're not going to break those guys. And Sean O'Malley is a dude who sometimes that's what happens is he gets out there and he does all this crazy shit and just flusters people. And once they get a little confused and a little off, there's not much they can do.
Right.
And so this is a hard one to pick for me. It could go either way, but the fan favorite pick I think is O'Malley by KO because it's going to be crazy and it's going to be fun. I think it's going to be a really fun fight either way. Anytime O'Malley's in a fight, he's going to try to make it a striking match and he's going to do some crazy shit. So it's going to be fun to watch. That might be fight of the night.
Yeah, I'm right with you. I think I'm looking forward more to that than I am the trilogy fight, which we could talk about right now if you'd like.
Yeah, I do say I do like the fact that Sean O'Malley's played a little bit of head games and dyeing his hair the color of the Ecuadorian flag where Vera's from. I think it's great, man.
I did notice that. Yeah, I mean, talk about the trilogy fight. I mean, I think we're anticipating this. I mean, you said it yourself. It might be the greatest heavyweight fight in the history of UFC. Can you talk about a little bit more about why you feel like that and what you expect in this fight?
Well, I think it comes from when you want to talk about who the greatest fighter of all time is, right, or even by weight class. When you talk about heavyweight, you generally get names like Fedor, Cain Velasquez, even Fabricio Verdun, stuff like that, right? To me, Cain Velasquez does not – skill for skill, is he maybe the best heavyweight ever? That's a conversation we can have. But his record and his career and all the things that marred it doesn't qualify him for that. Fedor, very valid argument. He beat two of the best heavyweights in the world at the time that he was doing it, end of his career notwithstanding. And then really, to me, you get to either Verdun or Stipe. Verdun just has a lot of huge names on his resume, but a lot of them are, when those guys were older and stuff. But he was the first person to beat Fedor ever, so it helps him. But Stipe Miocic has done something that no one else in history has managed to do, and that is defend the UFC heavyweight title 3 times. It doesn't sound like a lot, but he's the only person in history to do it, right? At heavyweight, the stakes are much higher with every second that goes by. When you have dudes that are 250 pounds throwing their limbs at each other, I mean, like, one false move, your night's over. It doesn't matter who you are. There is no real discussion of who does or doesn't have power at heavyweight like there are in the lighter weight classes. You don't have those little technical guys who just decision fight like Frankie Edgar. You know what I mean? It's all dudes that could hold in one moment.
They've all got lunch pails.
Yeah, so like nobody holds the belt for very long because everybody just gets caught eventually. But Stipe did it 3 times. Lost on his 4th defense to Daniel Cormier, who came up from light heavyweight, was the light heavyweight title holder at the time, came up to heavyweight, knocked out Stipe in the first round to earn the heavyweight title, become one of 3 people ever to hold titles in 2 weight classes at the same time, the other 2 being Conor McGregor and Henry Cejudo.
Right.
And that's why Daniel Cormier is considered one of the greatest heavyweights of all time. Because one loss at heavyweight is to the other guy who would be considered the greatest UFC heavyweight of all time. His resume at heavyweight is also phenomenal. He was the Strikeforce Grand Prix champion, so he was the last ever heavyweight champion of Strikeforce before the UFC bought the company and brought all those fighters over. And arguably at that point in time, Strikeforce had a much better heavyweight division than the UFC. He beat Josh Barnett. He beat Bigfoot Silva when Bigfoot Silva was a big deal. He came over and beat Roy Nelson and a bunch of other guys. I mean, Cormier at heavyweight is the real, like in my mind, is the real Cormier. He made his name at light heavyweight fighting John Jones twice and earning the title every time John Jones wasn't around. But to me, like the heavyweight Cormier is the real deal, full version of Cormier. When he doesn't have to restrict himself, he can be happy, enjoy his life, and go train and just be a monster. And so the question is, like, what happens that first fight, right? Cormier comes up from light heavyweight and lands that knockout punch on Stipe. So Cormier is a much better wrestler than Stipe. And he was able to manipulate Stipe in the close range and land a right hook on his chin after Stipe went for an overhook. So Stipe went to put his arm over Cormier's. Cormier slipped it out, landed that right hook as he pivoted out to try to get out of the grip. Knocked Stipe out cold. In that second fight, Cormier lands that same punch 4 different times. Stipe apparently didn't learn his lesson, but also that punch didn't have the same impact that it did that first fight. So the question is, did he get lucky? What happened? Then the second fight, Stipe comes in and, makes an adjustment in round 4 after losing the first 3 rounds, I think, and finds an opening and is able to land a bunch of body shots on Cormier that kind of rattle him and stumble him, and then lands a couple big shots up top and puts Cormier out. So, you know, there's arguments for both sides being lucky shots or what, but it's always fun to get to the trilogy fight, especially when like the stakes are as high as they are. You know, both fights were ended by, you know, something you could just get caught by. You know, like it's arguable that both guys just got caught, but they also were in the conversation for the greatest heavyweight of all time. So it's interesting that, you know, it's such a close fight in everybody's mind, and it's such an important fight if you want to look at it that way for the history of the division and what they do moving forward, right? What is the challenges, I guess, of facing a guy for a third time? It's happened a few times in the UFC, obviously, but with a belt in the line like this, I mean, how special is it that it is the third time, and how do these guys prepare differently than maybe if it was the first or even the second time? Yeah, I mean, I don't know. I mean, that might depend on how each guy felt during the first couple camps. I mean, I think a lot of what happened the second fight was that Cormier was a little overconfident. I think he also was coming off of back surgery and admittedly was not able to train as much as he normally would. So he says his cardio wasn't as good as it would normally be. So, you know, if his cardio is a little better, his body shots don't quite have as much damage as they did, and yada, yada, yada. And Cormier didn't listen to his corner literally begged him, please just wrestle him. Please just wrestle. You're going to get caught. And he didn't do it. So there's a lot of question marks around Cormier and his preparation for that second fight and his decision-making during that second fight. So I think that whatever those things are, Cormier will address them for sure. You know, if his preparation was a little lacking, he's the one who would know that, and he's the one who would have to make that change. He also, in between the second and third fight, has made a coaching change. He's added a new striking coach in Mark Henry, who is one of the best coaches in the game. He's coached Alvarez, he's coached Frankie Edgar, and you know, a bunch of other high-level guys. And you know, there's. It's not to say that his normal team in American Kickboxing Academy is not a great team under Javier Mendez, especially, you know, they got Beeb over there, they have Luke Rockhold, they have tons of high level guys. So it's not that that's a bad team, but adding a new perspective in somebody as highly respected as Mark Henry could be a big game changer there, I think. Well, so the third time in a row, these guys are locking gloves. Who do you got? Who are you putting your money on for this fight? Are you comfortable? Do you think you know who it's going to be this early? Yeah, I'm surprised it's as close as it is. Actually, I think Cormier is going to take it. I think if Cormier goes in with proper preparation and follows the proper strategy and game plan, I think he takes it. It's a smaller cage, so they're closer together, which is what Cormier wants. Cormier does not want to sit at the end of Stipe's punches. Cormier does not want to be far enough away for Stipe to kick him, any of that. Cormier wants to be up in Stipe's grill where he can control the Greco-Roman wrestling game and the dirty boxing game where he excels. So the smaller cage helps with that. Him having, you know, if the rumors are true and his back injury and surgery and recovery and all that impacted his training and his cardio for that first fight, him having the full camp unhindered by injury should be good news for him. And I think, you know, I think in that second fight he did, you know, had a little bit of a big head. He had knocked out Stipe the first time. His last few fights had been relatively easy. So I think a lot of the fight can be, you know, while it was a great adjustment by Stipe, a great move to figure out that body shot was going to land, while Stipe has never gotten tired. His cardio has never failed him. He's one of the toughest dudes out there. He is never flustered. He thrives in kind of chaotic moments. I think that there's a lot that Daniel Cormier did and a lot of decisions that he made that gave Stipe the opportunity to do to recognize that pattern, to land that body shot, which opened up the head shot. So I think that if Cormier comes in well-trained and with, a level head on his shoulders and follows the plan that he's supposed to when his coaches ask him to do so, then I think that it's a real winnable fight for Cormier. I think he's just a better, more well-rounded fighter.
Well, I mean that rounds up the entire card. And you really brought it tonight. I'm looking forward to this one.
Yeah, me too. Who do you want to see?
I'm mostly excited about the O'Malley fight, but the heavyweight fight is going to be. Right? I love to see O'Malley win. I love those kind of guys.
It's that marketing, man. That marketing, he's brilliant there.
He reminds me of McGregor, and I love McGregor. But yeah, I think I'm rooting for Cormier too. I think he's always been one of my more favorite fighters, and I think, I'm interested to see how this fight goes. But I think I'm guessing 4 or 5 rounds.
Yeah, I'm in the same boat. I don't think it's going to end early. I think it's going to be either a late finish or a decision. It's going to be crazy. I might put some money on Cormier, but I don't know. I mean, I like Cormier a lot. He's a phenomenal fighter. I think he gets a bad rap for not having beat John Jones. I think he's amazing. I think without John Jones, he's one of the greatest of all time. But also, I like Stipe a lot. How can you not like a guy who is the champ of the world and, has probably made as much money as he needs at this point and has never stopped being a firefighter in Cleveland? And his plan for his fight retirement is to be a full-time EMT and firefighter.
It's a Hollywood story.
Who does that? You know what I mean? And he's from Cleveland. He actually is the first person to bring a title back to Cleveland. Before the Indians.
Yeah. Well, LeBron did it first.
Yeah. He did it first. He brought that title there. Good for him.
It is 2 Americans too, which I guess is special for the country but
yeah,
in Las Vegas after all.
Yeah, and an interesting bit of trivia. As I mentioned earlier, Daniel Cormier is one of 3 people ever to hold consecutive titles in 2 weight classes, and one of the other 2 is Henry Cejudo, and they were both on the same Olympic wrestling team together.
Wow. No love lost there.
Yeah. So, I mean, I kind of hope Cormier wins for his legacy, but, Stipe, I think, is the greatest UFC heavyweight ever. And if he wins, it would suck for Cormier because then Cormier would have the legacy of just being the champ when John Jones wasn't there and being the guy who just couldn't hack it against Stipe. He's just below the greatest of each division, the light heavyweight and heavyweight division if he loses. So, high pressure for Cormier here.
Yeah, it's going to definitely – I'm excited to see the impact of this fight when it's over and what happens after this. Yeah. I mean, you don't make him fight a 4th time, right?
No, most likely not. Unless it's crazy and controversial or real close, then maybe, but I doubt it. Cormier's talking about retiring. Yeah. But either way, even if whoever wins, they got to fight Francis Ngannou next, and nobody wants to do that. Stipe survived and won once. I don't know if he's doing it twice.
That's awesome. Yeah. Well, listen, I appreciate it. This has been an awesome talk, and looking forward to the fight for sure.
This is the first video together.
Yeah.
Just 2 of us. Thanks for watching, everybody. Don't forget to like and subscribe to the channel, and we'll catch you next time on Lit Sports Online.